Open your eyes. I understand. You're afraid you're going to hurt someone. But choosing to keep your eyes closed because you're scared, that's what they do. And you don't have to go through life blind because you are not like them. Today on the Comic Book Report, Dawn of X Omnibus Volume 1 from Marvel Comics. Stick around and check it out. Greetings from Krakoa, everyone. My name is Dominic, and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And yes, today we are doing the full review of the Dawn of X Omnibus Volume 1 from Marvel Comics. In case you missed it in maybe one of my shorts or the overview video I did for this release, I am a huge fan of this period for X-Men and the other adjacent X titles. This is the Age of Krakoa, the Krakoa era for Marvel's Merry Mutants, one of my favorite periods in X-Men history, bar none. And I knew the overview wouldn't be sufficient, and now that I've finished all the contents within this omnibus, I can't wait to do the full review today. Before we dive into the Dawn of X, though, I would like to go ahead and shout out the channel sponsor, Panel Bound Comics. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link to them in the video description, and if you see anything site-wide you like, you can even use my discount code at checkout, The Comic Book Report, to save $2 off of your order. Please note, if you do use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's still a fantastic way to support this channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's omnibus review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The comics in this volume were written primarily by Jonathan Hickman, Gary Dugan, Tini Howard, Benjamin Percy, and more, and illustrated by Lanil Francis Yu, Matteo Lolli, Marcus Tu, Joshua Cassara, and more. The comics in this volume were published by Marvel Comics beginning in 2019. As far as what this omnibus includes, it collects X-Men, the 2019 series, issues 1 through 7, X-Force, the 2019 series, issues 1 through 8, Marauders, the 2019 series, issues 1 through 8, Excalibur, the 2019 series, issues 1 through 8, Fallen Angels, the 2019 series, issues 1 through 6, New Mutants, the 2019 series, issues 1 through 7, Wolverine, the 2020 series, issues 1 through 3, and Giant Size X-Men, Jean Grey and Emma Frost, issue 1. And finally, this is an oversized hardcover edition with beautiful glossy print paper stock, a sewn binding, and a total of 1,400 pages. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first dedicated look at the front dust jacket cover for the Dawn of X Omnibus Volume 1. I will admit the grayscale of it all did leave a little bit more to be desired for me, but the longer I've had this in my collection, the more it is really growing on me. You still get some nice art there, and the formatting is minimalistic and still pretty rad. I should say as well, there is a direct market cover available for this release. I'll throw up a quick thumbnail just to compare. While I may have still preferred a better cover in my mind, I do like that I got the standard instead of the direct market. Now on the spine, we do have the Marvel Omnibus logo up there at the top. Then we do have the Field of Grey retained here with a lot of black font. We do have this Age of Krakoa X-Men logo, which I love to see here on the spine, along with Dawn of X in big, bold black lettering. And down at the bottom, we do have a Volume 1. A very stylish design, but again, for me, I would have loved a bigger splash of color and maybe some artwork, but overall, not a bad spine design. On the back of the cover, we have similar minimalist aesthetic here. We have half of an X, we have some of the Krakoan script, a blurb about the collection, we do have what it includes, Marvel logo, pricing information, all that good stuff. Now this is the formatting and general graphic design style for the entire Krakoa era, beginning with House of X, Powers of 10, and a lot of the hardcovers I've had in the past from this period do have a lot of this same design aesthetic, so I wasn't overly shocked to see this. Again, it's not 100% for me, but it is distinctive and still really sharp. Okay, and now we're going to spend a minute on the exteriors one final time. This time I will show you the interior flaps, take it all out at a glance, and also show you the Under the Dust Jacket hardback book itself. So on the dust jackets, we have more about this collection. On the back of the dust jacket, we do have some bits about the creators, which I like to see as well. Overall, again, the dust jacket design, while it's nice, it's a bit drab for me with all the gray, but no real complaints from me. Overall, there are things about it I do really enjoy, and I think there's some people that are going to love the design choices here. On the hardback book itself, we do have a largely what the dust jacket gave us, but with even less detail and art, especially on that front. Again, we do have an X, Dawn of X, we have some title work stuff on the spine. No real bells or whistles here, it is in that same gray. No complaints from me, but would have loved perhaps a bit more art to pop, so maybe a minor complaint there. Overall, not a bad design choice, but maybe not quite my speed. Okay, now for all you prospective collectors out there wondering about this binding. At 1400 pages, it's always good to check this out, and I'm happy to say that so far this sewn binding is really well done. I have a nice eye here in my collection. The pages lay down very straight. I didn't find it to be over stiff, and I found gutter loss to generally be really minimal. Of course, you'll be able to see for yourself as we flip through the collection as well, but yes, very impressed. Okay, just a quick note for everyone wondering, can I start with Dawn of X Omnibus Volume 1 to enjoy the Krakoa era? While I will say yes, you can do it, you really should read House of X Powers of 10, which I have here to the left. This is the Maxi Series event book that sets up the status quo for the Krakoa era, just in general. It's written by Jonathan Hickman, and it's actually getting a reprint of its oversized hardcover, I believe, in November. Of course, I'm not sure if I'm releasing this video in what month, so November 2025, this is supposed to get a reprint. This, again, being House of X Powers of 10. And now just a quick look at some of the other oversized hardcover books I had during this period, a lot of the contents of which are found in this omnibus. I have the X-Men by Jonathan Hickman omnibus, along with the first volumes here of Excalibur and Marauders. Again, we have just a couple of issues from each of these series included in this omnibus. Instead of going title or creator specific, we do get to jump around and read an issue or two from each of these series where it makes sense, and you get the broader effect of the Krakoa era, the broader context of what's happening on the nation state for the mutants there, rather than just reading isolated story arcs. A great mapping achievement from Marvel. Okay, and with that we can go ahead and dive into the book itself. After some great end pages, we do have a title page, followed by a 2-page spread that essentially maps everything included in this omnibus. We have details about the creators, things of that kind. There's also publication information. After that, we have another 2-page spread that has a Dawn of X, just massive logo across it, which is quite cool. And then after that, we do jump right into the first issue within the collection. And it has an issue cover, which I really like, and all the details you need about where this issue came from, what issue it is, things like that. That is particularly helpful with an omnibus like this, where the mapping jumps from series to series. Now, before we get too much further, let me give a little bit more context about the Dawn of X omnibus here. Basically, what came before this Dawn of X omnibus? What do you need to read? What do you need to know before picking this up? And could you just pick it up by itself and dive into the Krakoa era? You probably could start with this book and not be too lost, as it is a pretty good starting point for the new status quo. However, I highly recommend you read that book I mentioned earlier, House of X Powers of 10. That is a maxi series that basically sets up the events of this entire Krakoa era. But for this review, all you really need to know is that a lot of wild things happened, but it culminated with the mutants creating their own nation state of Krakoa. It's an island nation where basically the mutants give each other amnesty for any past crimes or misgivings. They also find a way to resurrect themselves, so you see all sorts of mutants that haven't been in Marvel continuity in some time, some coming back from the dead, and basically they're trying to build a nation. Now, with that in mind, all of the X-Men and X-adjacent books all kind of have to do and hover around Krakoa itself, and this is largely considered the Age of Krakoa or the broader Krakoa era. The Dawn of X, of course, is the first portion or first couple story arcs within this time period, and we have the first slice of that here with this omnibus. As far as this book is mapped, I mentioned it earlier, but I'm really happy with it overall. I think that if you don't want to go just title or series specific, this is probably the best way to read this material. I think that there's some books that it might be advantageous to read their entire run just in a solo series capacity, like X-Force and Wolverine by Benjamin Percy. I think stand alone fairly well. I mean, they're kind of companion books with each other, but I think if you want the broader experience of everything Krakoa, everything that's happening with the mutants during this period, this is probably the definitive way to do it. How it maps it is basically every couple issues you jump from series to series, and when it makes sense, you'll have multiple issues of a series together if they're trying to wrap up a story arc, and I feel like Marvel really took the time to lovingly map this collection. It can be jarring to go from one series to the next, but I think overall, when some character has a big impact, they'll be referenced in the next issue of a different series, and in that way, you get this kind of cohesion with all of these narratives, for the most part, and it just makes the whole world and breadth of Krakoa feel that much more expansive. So in this work, you do start with the proper X-Men title by Jonathan Hickman, but we do jump across the other books as well. X-Force, New Mutants, Marauders, Excalibur, Fallen Angels, Wolverine, just the list goes on, and what I like about it is that they, again, pair the issues in a way that makes reading order logical sense, and even though it can be a bit jerky as you go from series to series, I do think that this is a great way to just get the entire layout of Krakoa. Now, reviewing a book like this is a bit tricky because there are so many different plot elements and series to cover all within one book. So I think right now I want to go into each of the individual series included in this work and give you a little bit of a primer of what you can expect. I know I did my spoiler warning, and while I will get into some spoilers, I'll keep it relatively surface level, hopefully, so you can just get an idea of what you can expect from each of the books contained within this massive volume. So first up, we have the X-Men series by Jonathan Hickman. Again, this omnibus has the first 7 issues of that run. And this book has kind of the main team of X-Men, but we don't really have them going on all that many missions off Krakoa. There are a couple, but they're few and far between. I actually think Hickman's run on X-Men proper feels more like what I would call Tales from Krakoa. We follow different aspects of the X-Men team, different collections of main mutants as they go about their day. In one issue, you might have a political meeting with Xavier, Magneto, and Apocalypse back on kind of other nations like the United States, kind of trying to broker sort of alliances and things like that. In another issue, you might be following the Summers family at their home on the moon, talking about where they're at in life. Sometimes they're fighting just really interesting villains, and we do have some issues that feel more like a proper X-Men good versus evil sort of battle, but this really just gives you an idea of what's happening around Krakoa. I think that the main X-Men title by Hickman is a great baseline for this omnibus, and I feel like we have a lot more distinct specialization that branch off from there. The X-Force book is one of my personal favorites. I mentioned it earlier in the video. That run is by Benjamin Percy, and for those that don't know, X-Force is often the kind of black ops, special ops team within the X universe. They usually use lethal force and get their hands dirty to do the jobs that are necessary. And in the case of the Krakoa era, the Dawn of X era, they're kind of Krakoan security. I think that that's the best way to describe them. They're also sort of their defensive force, they're sort of their broader arm too that will go off into the other nations to help prevent attacks against Krakoa and various other interests. Really like that book. It's probably the most gritty, that along with Wolverine. The next series I'll talk about is Marauders. This is another really big favorite of many people. I believe this run was by Gary Dugan, and it follows Kitty Pryde, going by Kate Pryde for this run, and a band of would-be mutant, let's call them pirates. They basically sail around the world. We find out early on that Kate Pryde, for whatever reason, cannot go through the Krakoan gateways, which allow them to kind of teleport anywhere they put these gates. And because of that, whenever she wants to go anywhere, living on an island, she does it by boat travel. We have a really eclectic, fun team along the Marauders as well, like Iceman and Pyro and Storm and many, many more. Another series, Excalibur. Now, this is the more fantasy bent series. It's definitely within the fantasy genre. This has characters like Gambit and Rogue, and we have Captain Britain, this time being, of course, Betsy Braddock. We have Apocalypse and many more on that roster as well. This series is really fascinating. I think that many people overlooked this one, and yet it ended up being the most important when going into the first big crossover, the X of Swords, which is not included in this omnibus. The first couple issues of Excalibur, though, are the first 8, and it's fun, again, for fantasy fans. The next series I want to talk about today, and it was actually the first series I hadn't read in this omnibus, this along with New Mutants, but the series is Fallen Angels. Now, this is a 6-issue miniseries that primarily follows Psylocke and X-23, Laura Kinney, and Cable. They go on a lot of really interesting adventures. They kind of defect from Krakoa and try to handle Psylocke's own personal vendetta and mission. The art here is gripping and fascinating. It certainly has a darker edge to it, and being kind of a standalone miniseries, it doesn't have that ongoing series feel to it, and I think in that way it feels very novel in this collection. It feels pretty unique, and overall, again, it was newer content for me, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was really fascinating, and I really liked getting to know more about Psylocke. This is the Quanon Psylocke, not Betsy Braddock, and I thought that was a really fun character. I'm always a huge fan of X-23, so seeing her team up with Psylocke, it just really worked for me. After Fallen Angels, I did want to talk about that other series that was new to me, and that was New Mutants by Jonathan Hickman and a couple others. This book does collect 1 through 7, and it's really fascinating how this New Mutants series is broken up, because you have a couple issues that follow Jonathan Hickman's writing on New Mutants, and a couple issues that follow a separate writer's run on New Mutants. There's different art across them, and you follow different branches of New Mutants. I definitely favored the Jonathan Hickman run, as it really teamed up the original roster of New Mutants, or at least a good handful of them. They followed the Starjammers into space, and it got into all sorts of interstellar mischief. Reuniting Cannonball and Sunspot was a particular note for me, though I think this entire New Mutants run was a ton of fun. Again, this and Fallen Angels were the only new titles for me, but I really enjoyed the ride. There is the Wolverine series. You get the first couple issues of that run as well. Again, I mentioned it earlier, but this was by Benjamin Percy. This is Wolverine's solo series, and I think of all the titles in this omnibus, this perhaps feels the most set apart. In fact, I think you could read Wolverine completely independent of any other Krakoa book or the Krakoa era and still make a lot of sense of it, especially these first couple of issues, and I just really enjoyed that. This is a period where he is on the X-Force team proper, so you do get some connective tissue there, and Benjamin Percy is really great with that throughout the entire run of both X-Force and Wolverine, but I was really excited that we got a couple issues of this run here in this book. And then lastly, we do have the giant-sized Jean Grey and Emma Frost one-shot. This was a really artistically beautiful one-shot that followed them kind of going through these kind of psychic mind spaces, and again, just an artistic treat throughout. And yeah, that's just kind of my overall primer on each of these series. Again, the fact that we get all of them in one book, I think is a really unique experience. The way they're mapped really help you to just kind of enjoy it. You get to feel like the progression of Krakoa one issue at a time, but across the board, and I thought that that was fun. Across all these series, you have so many of the Marvel mainstays as far as the mutant roster, and I couldn't have been happier with this omnibus. Now, something else I find interesting about this collection, or at least this period in the Dawn of X, is while it's really important, we get some character development here, I feel like we haven't really gotten to the stage where everything's starting to funnel toward the first event, again, that being X of Swords. There is a point with a lot of these series where everything begins to bottleneck toward that main event, and I feel like this omnibus really gets us just prior to when things start to heat up there. I would say in general, this first omnibus feels more like a primer than anything else. You get the feeling of a lot of these series, you get introduced to a lot of the main characters, and I think being kind of the start of a whole new era of X-Men, each of these titles are pretty accessible to newer readers. Of course, there'll be a lot of characters you perhaps don't know, but all of the creators do a good job of giving you the information you need to enjoy the story. Again, I would recommend House of X Powers of 10 before picking this up, but I think with that in mind, this is still a great place for newer people to dive into the mutants, especially because this is the beginning of a new status quo, and this run goes for a while, and so you get a really good way to just break into kind of all the mutant books at once, and it's a great way to see which characters you prefer, which writers, which artists, maybe even which series, which genres you enjoy. For example, if you want a swashbuckling good time, high adventures on the high seas, something like Marauders might fit the bill. If you're like a gritty, heavy action movie fan and you don't mind more visceral violence, I'd probably point you towards X-Force or Wolverine. If you want a fantasy-based superhero book that, again, is heavy on fantasy, I'd put you at Excalibur. And if you like just right down the middle, what is going on with the mutants, what is Krakoa, I think Jonathan Hickman's X-Men will fit the bill. And the fact that you get all of that again in one volume is just fantastic. I will say the art in this collection I thought to be also really, really good, but again, it varies. I think some art hit for me more than others. I think all the artists were tremendously talented, but with so many books collected, you get a vast array of different artistic types. And yet the character models feel familiar enough that if you see one pop up in one series and then go to another series, there is some visual fidelity there. It's not like, who is this character? Oh, I remember him from this series. And I liked that. I think that this book is also very vibrant, which the kind of drab gray exterior of this book might not lead you to believe. But again, all the art is just so saturated and wonderful. Fallen Angels, it's actually a bit darker as far as the colors and hues and all that, but everything else is just so lush and vibrant, which really reflect the kind of optimism of this early Krakoa era, and I just think that that's really fantastic. A couple other notes I want to say about this. I know I've reviewed a lot of these titles individually, like Excalibur, Marauders, X-Force, X-Men, Wolverine, and you can find that in my channel's history if you're interested in seeing more story-specific reviews. I'd be happy to try to point or direct as many as I can in the video description, but I really can't overstate enough how much I really love this period in X-Men history and in Marvel Comics in general. Reading House of X Powers of 10 and then jumping into some of the titles found in this very book, it just rejuvenated my interest in the X-Men. I've always enjoyed that franchise. I've always enjoyed so many of these characters, but it's been a while since I've really dug deep and just invested myself in a period and into just so many different runs happening within the X-Men umbrella. And that's really what happened for me here, first in House of X Powers of 10, and then in many of the runs collected in this single omnibus. I should note as well, if I haven't already, I've had some people ask, how many of these omnibuses do you think it will take to basically collect the entire Krakoa era? And I'll say, I'm not sure. People that have invested more time in this than me have seemed to suggest maybe 10 to 12. Will Marvel print all of those? Will they change their printing preference or what they're doing with the vision of this? I have no idea, but I really hope to collect as many of these as possible. I know they have already solicited the Volume 2 omnibus that picks up where this one leaves off, and I believe that that's slated to come out in March of 2026, if I'm not mistaken. Another thing I like about this omnibus, and you'll see it here, is the vast array of extras. We have a beautiful and bountiful cover art gallery, variant cover art gallery, and we have full-size printings of the issue covers. They're all Virgin covers as well, so you don't get any text, you just get the art. You have the attributions of who created the covers, and this is just a spectacular extra. I see this often with omnibuses and various collected editions, but I think for the Dawn of X, this was a particularly fun portion of extras, because you just get so many covers, and I love that they're not thumbnailized. You do get the full reproduction, and I think that that was a really great choice. After that, there are additional extras like sketches, outlines. We even have, I believe, the covers for the Dawn of X trade paperbacks that were released that basically attempted a similar mapping here, and I really like that. I love the generous amount of extras here at the back. Again, a really fun collection that I loved revisiting. I loved reading some of the material I hadn't, and just flipping through and seeing some of these old stories I had reviewed once upon a time. I'm so happy we're finally getting this. I know that this was such a requested period and much anticipated release for so many out there. I know X-Men Omnibus fans are eating quite good these days. This was a huge year for X-Men Omnibuses, but this is easily amongst my favorite, along with things like the all-new X-Men by Brian Michael Bendis, which I also really loved, the X-Men Blue and Gold, which I'm checking out right now. Just, again, a really great year for X-Men Omnibuses, and I'm optimistic for what 2026 may hold. And with that, we reach the back of our collection today. We have more gray end pages, and that really is your quick look at the X-Men Dawn of X Omnibus Volume 1 from Marvel Comics. Again, this was a huge milestone release for Marvel. Again, one of the most expansive runs in contemporary X-Men history, and the fact that we're starting to get these out in Omnibus now, it's just a real dream. Don't miss out on picking up the reprinted House of X Powers of 10 oversized hardcover coming soon, and definitely check out for more X-Men content here on the Comic Book Report. And now, the grade. For a brilliant and perhaps the most definitive way to explore the Krakoan age of X-Men titles, the Comic Book Report is happy to give the Dawn of X Omnibus Volume 1 from Marvel Comics an A. This is a must-read X-Men collection for me, and after reading House of X Powers of 10, that's really all you should need to dive into this period full force. The array of creative talent, both writers and illustrators and genres and titles, it's just really incredible to see the breadth of what is explored in this singular volume. It absolutely leaves me eager for the Volume 2 that's supposed to be coming out sometime next year, and I'm just really happy with Marvel and all the attention to detail they put into mapping this incredible book. The extensive visual extras at the back was also a notable treat, and this is an omnibus I definitely will not be forgetting anytime soon. In the comments, I would love to hear what you think of the Krakoan age of Marvel Comics. Did you pick up this Dawn of X omnibus? Do you plan to? Did you read the individual series by title rather than the kind of mapping we have here? Let me know all of that and more in the comment section, and thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, those comments we talked about, and maybe share this video with a friend. Thanks everyone, bye.